All right, before we get started back, one of the things we talked about as it relates to the cultural and spiritual influences, Deacon Askin reminded me of one thing that we did, one of the practices that we had, most especially within the African American context, and I remember it very vividly in my home state. It's what they call setting up, where they have the bodies will be at the houses. That was the term that they would use. They would have the bodies at the house, and oftentimes a person would have to sit with that person, the person that had died, all through the course of the night. And so that was the practice of a lot of, most especially southern states and small town areas, where they would have the bodies in the homes. That was back in the day, way back in the day. So I do remember as a young boy. And so that was a practice, you know. So for example, that was a practice, and also another practice was the having food at the church was a new phenomenon from back in the day. It used to be previously it was held at persons' houses. So it is a perk, not a right. It's a perk, not a right, because it's not a supposed to be. So if you know the origins of it, typically it was back in the day was you would go to whoever that person was house, whatever person they have designated, that's where you would eat your food, have your family settings. It was not the church. So the churches have taken on a lot of those roles and responsibilities, and some churches have gotten out of that practice completely. There are some that we still do it here, that some still do it as a part of us to support those families, but that has not always been. Let me make sure we're clear with that. So we understand that clearly, that it was started with the home, and went from the home to the churches, and oftentimes for the churches, because at that time many families had large families, and the churches would have a place to provide those places for support for them, all right? So let me do this. Let me just take about a few minutes, take about 2 to 3 minutes as it relates to the takeaway from the first session that we dealt with. Anything coming up for you now, for those of you who are in the audience today as it relates to the loss, the grief process, anything comes up for you now? Anything new? Anything that you were unaware of? Anything that was a takeaway for you going forward? Yes, ma'am.
How do you prepare your family for the change from the cultures? So say for instance, some people now want to be cremated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now other people, like for instance with me, my family says bring me to the church and everything. That was not my wish. I want my body to be donated to science. Mm-hmm. So how do you go about preparing your family for those type of things? Because everything you write is just customs. Mm-hmm. And if I could see a better benefit from people studying, giving them the opportunity to study, to see what's causing certain trends and illnesses in the family, be better off.
And I think you raise there's two parts, Sister Atwater, that you raise a great point to. One is the cremation part, because typically we have this idea within the African American church that I want to see my loved one's body physically, and we think for some reason, for some biblical reason, that is a completely opposed to the biblical text of the scripture, that one should not be cremated. So that's a custom, and that is a practice that we've always had. It's always been the physical body. I don't have any issue with it, because oftentimes it comes down to money. If a person we got to get to the place of practicality. So why would I share with for example, if I have a family that comes to me and says, Pastor, our family, or if a person wishes, our family can't afford this funeral. It's going to cost us $15,000, $20,000. Why would you put your family in that position and that predicament, and put yourself in a place of an embarrassment of putting out GoFundMe pages, going around begging for money or begging the church and thinking the church is supposed to give you money for that reason. So take the practical route. The practical route is to look for an opportunity to maybe cremation route. Or even if you have the money, you say that your loved one says to you, I believe those monies would be better spent if you would do this as a investment for my grandchildren, or my education for my children, or building a legacy, a wealth legacy for my family, which is often neglected and never thought about within the African American context. So, and then the second part of that statement I think is a wonderful part, and that is this, to be able to study, and because there are a lot of things that happen in these bodies. And oftentimes, if they get an opportunity to study those of us of African American descent, it would be a blessing. It would be obviously a breakthrough, probably physically, for those generations to come as it relates to cancers. I mean, you're talking about a plethora of things. If they have access to that, that's what they do to cadavers anyway. I mean, they study those bodies that are not. Those folks who don't claim those bodies, they use it as a method to study those. So I think that is a good way forward. But I think you begin having that discussion early, not late. You begin having that discussion and talking about the benefits of it, juxtaposed to customs and traditions. That was then, this is now. And then talk about the practicality and what is of greater good and what is greater value. Because you can always have a memorial. I mean, there's a person that just recently died. I would have thought in Florida that I used to pastor. I just knew this person was going to be funeralized, bodied, everything else. No, I found out and discovered she was cremated. She made a decision. All she wanted was a memorial. She wanted short, sweet, nothing fancy, what have you. She wanted to take those monies and what have you to be invested in a different way. That was practical and that was helpful because her husband is still alive as well. So, I think that is the most doable thing. I've got an aunt that's very adamant. She said it for years, and she's in her 70s now, and she said it for years. I want to be cremated, even when it was not popular, you know. But it's important that we talk about the practicality. We talk about an opportunity for investment-wise. We talk about the benefit of our families. How can it help us? But I think you have those conversations very early in life, and then also you put it on paper. You put it in pen and paper. Your wishes, and this is one of the things that I do even at the end of life when I'm doing in a hospital setting, and one of the most disruptive and challenging things is to have a person who has in that bed is dying, and he or she has their certain wishes, and they have not identified their certain wishes, and you got 20 people around the bed trying to make a decision about that person's wishes, which goes completely against the grain about anything. I come in the room, I ask the question, I would ask the question, what do you think so-and-so would want to have done? And then I take a point of privilege, a pastoral privilege. I would say to them, you do know that this is not about you. That is about that person that's in that bed. So how do you expect that how do you think that they would want to leave this earth? How do you think they would want to train? Do you want them to be grueling and dying and slobbering and people having to jump on their chest and try to raise them up, all that? No. So if you know that that's not the case, so why are you grappling with that? But you eliminate that. I mean, black folks are notorious for not putting stuff on paper and having somebody saying this. Well, and this is, let me go back to another cultural word in the black community. They know what to do. No, they don't. You need to take the pen, put the paper, write down exactly back to what Sister Atwater was saying, and write it out. Put it on paper. And that way it becomes a learning tool for them, and it also can be a legacy for your family. Because my mom, my auntie did X, Y, and Z. This is what she did. And you may find yourself that process being duplicated. So I think putting pen to paper is the most important thing. Yes, ma'am.
A question about cremation. When it say, maybe I got Well, you can explain it to me.
Mhm.
When it says resurrection, the dead in Christ shall rise first. So I'm thinking, if you cremated, how you gonna rise?
Okay, here, let me answer that question. Let me answer that question. Let me answer that question. Here it is. Do you believe God is God? Do you can believe He can do anything? Do you believe He can bring things in existence without stuff being there? Before the world was formed and created and pulled together, He brought something out of nothing? Okay. Did that answer your question? So I can't tell you the how or when, but I do know the power of God. And the fact that we're walking on this earth and all the systems that are in place now. So for example, who would have thought of changing the seasons? You got summer, you got winter, you got fall, you got spring. Some places, and who else would have some places that may not experience but 2 seasons? Who did that? All right. So go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. That would be my answer to you. So God is able to do all things. Exceedingly abundantly, all that we can ever think, imagine. He is able to do all things. I can't explain the intricacies, but I know the power of God. All right? So people will get say, well, what about how you ain't gonna be able to do that? How but he did. He got Lazarus, and he was completely dead. There was a power there. All right. Yes, ma'am. I'll come back to you.
You know, just kind of piggyback on her question, when we are resurrected, we will have new bodies.
Yeah. Not the old stuff. Yeah. And only He knows what that's going to be like. Yes, ma'am.
I was seeing something on TV the other day where it's becoming a culture for people to do compost now with their body.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So my question, they make it compost and put it in. Yeah, I saw it on the news the other day, I was looking at it, but my question is, there's no specific way, if it's a traditional funeral or cremation or compost, doesn't matter.
So you think about the how are Jews when the Jews die? When the Jews die, what happened when the Jewish person died? When a Jewish person dies, they enshroud them, right? They don't believe in what? In the process. What do we do? What do we do? They don't believe in embalming, right? They don't believe in that. Right. So there's traditions and customs and things that happen. It's just stuff that we have created, traditions and patterns that we have followed.
So in God's eyesight, Pastor, does that matter?
It doesn't. I mean, from dust we come, dust we return. Right? So at the end of the day, God holds life and death in His hand. Right? So how it's formed, how it's developed, it doesn't matter. These are traditions, and we went back to the traditions and culture. These are just cultural things that we think that are appropriate and proper. Now, my family probably go crazy. No, we ain't doing that. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. But if I put on paper, I want you to do it this way, then they're held to that. They're bound to that, right? So, but there are some that will still always use the church. There's always going to be a crowd that's going to use the church. There's going to be a crowd that's going to say, I just want a memorial. Just put the picture up, which is okay, which is fine. And be at the church. And the picture's there. There's some that say, I just want my funeral at the funeral home, which is fine, which is really appropriate if you didn't attend church anyway. Yeah, right. Yep, in Florida, they do that all the time, yeah.
So if they're not embalmed, how soon should they be buried?
I can't remember the exact number of days it is, but I do know that that's a tradition and practice of theirs. Yeah. All right, was there somebody else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going through the grief process with my aunt, because she was, she is
Right.
today. And you talking about those documentation, I was able to get her, when my uncle died, to get her to do a will, power of attorney, but she would not do a health directory, she would not do a living will, because in her mind, that meant, you trying to think I'm dying tomorrow.
Right.
And she never would do that, but we taught that process. And since I am in charge of her care being, I know what her wishes are. And I'm already seeing some family members trying to interject, and I'm grappling with that, You're not doing this and you're not doing that. And I try to be inclusive to all of the family members. Like my grandson said quickly, he says, well, Granny, why do you put it out there on the Facebook? Because we got relatives all over. So, and they constantly call me. So I just put it on Facebook, the status of what we're going through, so then they know. And they don't have to call me, and I don't have to answer their telephone calls. You know what I'm saying? Because when they call me, it's all, well, what we need to do now is this. But you're not here. You're not here to help this process. But I am really struggling with, what she was and what she is, and the hallucinations, the people in the room, folks trying to kill me. And you start now, where we are now, and I look back, all of the arguments that we were having a year and a half ago, about little things. She would argue with me. We've always been close. But she would argue with me about little things, and now I know that was the beginning of this process. So now I'm feeling guilty that I didn't see it back then.
Yeah.
So I'm really struggling.
Yeah, and it's very, very natural. So you have back again those myriad of emotions, guilt, and then people can cause the exasperation of the guilt because not only are you dealing with it individually, but when you get that phone call, even though I may dismiss you when you call me, but now you have complicated the grief, the guilt that then I start asking myself the question, am I really doing this? Should I be doing this? Should I be involved in this by myself? But I'm the only person that's dependable. She's losing her sense of independence. She's losing her sense of self-identity. She's losing all of that kind of stuff. But I think the most important thing is to be able to acknowledge those feelings, acknowledge those emotions, and then at the same time realize when you have done your best and let God do the rest. Those people who are talking will talk 15, 20 years from now about what you did and did not do. But as long as you're doing your best and you're putting the person's best interest at heart on the plate, that's all that matters. But if we can, back to what you talked about, get folks to begin identifying, and I mean stay in their ear until they get mad with you. I mean, literally, because as you see, it's that important, it's that critical, because you don't want to get to that stage where one day you're talking to them, the next day you can't talk to them, and all their wishes and wants have gone down the tube, and you're in a very challenging place. But I think it's important that you get that stuff identified, written down, documented at a very early stage in life. One of the things that I can truly say about some of my parents, the end of life stuff, they prepared all this stuff early. They telling us about stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so, but as you get older, you start realizing how important it is. I sent you this document. What did you do with it? Okay, Mom, I took care of A, B, C, and this. I sent you this. Did you do this? That kind of thing. So those things are necessary. So rather than perhaps having fun-filled gatherings, family gatherings, you need to have some serious conversation. that some of these gatherings need to be intentional. Like, Mom, we need to talk about this. Dad, we need to talk about this. And as an example to them, Mom, Dad, this is what we're doing. I just made a decision to put my will together, put my living trust. I just did this. You know what I'm saying? Right. So because you realize how important it is, and you don't want to put a person in a bad position where they get all the onslaught and all the chatter from other folks about what's going on in their lives.
And then the other part of that I've seen is with another family member, is when you're in that point that they don't have nothing in writing, and funeral services take advantage of those emotions. And they start selling you stuff that you don't even need, you know.
It's interesting. A friend of mine who's in Orlando, she works for the VA, and she works in decedent affairs, and she called me the other day and was talking about it was a death happening in a particular family's life, and she said, you wouldn't believe that they actually charging this family to make a phone call to a cemetery. And it's just another stream of income for them. But when you're in your emotions, and when you have not thought things out, and you don't know what's going on, and everything is not lined out, you're subject to sign anything. Say, okay, go ahead, do that, take care. Yeah, I need you to do that. And next thing you know, you get the bill back, and sometimes the bill is not itemized. It's just that this is what you're called. Now, give me an itemized bill as to exactly what's on this situation. So it's important to write it down, legally, document it, in print, and then once you got it in print, have a family meeting with everybody around the room. So people can't accuse you of somebody else manipulating the document. Say, this is my wishes. These are my wishes. I want all of you to hear. You getting this piece of jewelry, you getting these pair of shoes, you're getting this dress, and you're getting this pair of slacks. Why? Because they belong to me, and I choose where they go. That's what you got to do. You know, so trust me, I've been involved in too many instances, and too many that I don't even want to count. Let's go to the next slide. Grief in children and adolescents. Show grief through actions, not words. They act out. Get involved and engaged in a lot of unhealthy things. And one of the things I think we're missing most within our culture is realizing that children need to immediately go into counseling when death happens or occurs, whether it's their father, whether it's their mother or grandparents, so that they can process their emotions. As an adult, we typically can process some of the emotions, maybe not all of them, but children definitely cannot process some of the emotions. Some of the things are strange, and they don't know how to handle it. It's like a bag of tricks. So which one do I choose? So I choose sadness, or do I just grab anger out the bag? And so now everything that they're dealing with is about being in an angry posture. They're angry at school. They cannot operate and function in a school environment. You may find yourself receiving phone calls all day long until they've actually appropriately processed through. And this idea, yes, we pray for our children, and we pray through the process. We have God all involved, but there's also that practical side that you need to have. The children, let me give you an example. When I pastored in Baltimore, there was a deacon that, I loved dearly. Was a great support. Was an ideal deacon, a person, not only just deacon, but just a man in general, retired Air Force guy. When I first arrived at Baltimore, it was he and his sons that met me and helped move my stuff and what have you. His last name Harvey, Deacon Harvey. Harvey died in his early 50s. And had a brain bleed. And I never shall forget that when he died, his sons were very young, but I think part of the challenges that was there, I don't think, just based upon my knowledge during that time period, that they didn't get an opportunity to get the counseling that they need that was adequate and supportive of them. And we tried in different avenues with some of the support in the church, but I think they were a great case for us to take a look at, to provide avenues for support for them. But they were two young boys who had lost their father, and the father at a very young age. And when you don't get the support that you need and the counseling that you need, it can lead you down the pathway of very strong challenges. Not to say that's where they went, but they needed that support desperately, and they need it quickly. And so sometimes people will delay, but when children are involved, they immediately need to find somebody to provide support. Not just a one-shot deal, but on a multiple layer. Yes, ma'am.
Question, you in the field. And culturally, we have been in the past, our culture is what happens in the family stays in the family. And we wouldn't seek to get help outside. And we would go to a pastor, but that's as far as the extent as the black would go to get help. Do you see that changing today? We're reaching out more now, getting therapy, psychiatrists.
I do see it. I do see it changing somewhat, but there I do still think we have it's still a lot of stigma that's attached to it for mental health issues. People are still labeled, and then if you find out a person, you know, typically, even though we say we accept it, but if you find out a person is going to see somebody about depression, or you see a person is going to see a psychologist or a counselor because they've engaged in suicide ideation, because anybody can have the thought of death. I just want to die. You think about Elijah. If you look in the book of, you look in that same text, when he left at that scene, you know, if we want to be biblical about it, he sits under the juniper tree. He thought it all was lost. There was a functional role that he thought he lost, right? And he thought God was nowhere to be found. Under the juniper tree or the broom tree, he said, I want to die, right? It was not until he come out of that moment in time did he realize that he had so much more to live for. He found and discovered new meaning, new purpose, and his why, right? But I do believe that our problem is that we have labeled and stigmatized, and here's a cultural term for you. They've gone to the fifth floor. And I'm not sure how if that cultural statement has dissipated from our families, or you know they about crazy. You see what I'm saying? So you hear those words, and so what does that mean? So when you say that, what do you mean they're about crazy? So what are you saying that they're dealing with depression? Are you saying they're dealing with mental health issues? Are you saying that they're struggling with psychological problems? Are you saying that they are having some particular disorder? You know they had to go away for a while. So what does that mean? So, you know she's just now coming to herself. I mean, I can go down through the list, right? And then so oftentimes then what happens even in the church life, when people in the church go through that process, we will keep them away from the church. When in reality, we need to bring them to the church. Because, here it is, the church is filled with a lot of issues, a lot of challenges, a lot of sicknesses, a lot of diseases, a lot of sins. It's an amalgamation of a lot of stuff in one place. But it's a place where we're trying to become transformed. Not get better, but become transformed. It's a place where God is trying to grow us. He's trying to develop us. He's trying to process us. He's trying to show us, and he's trying to lead us to a certain place in space. It's not a place where we leave out, but it's a place that we integrate. So if you're getting psychological help, mental health issues, this is basically the icing around the cake.
When my girlfriend died, her son, 12 years old, before she died, he went from straight A's to all F's at 12. And so he wanted to know, why are all these people here? She hadn't died yet, but she was critically ill. And so he wanted to know why the people were there. He wanted to know, I just want to be by myself, me and my mama, So he understood something was going on, but he just didn't know what, because she didn't want nobody to tell her that she was dying. But I'm just saying that it affects them mentally, spiritually, and it affects their way of thinking, because he's 12, he didn't know how to process all of this.
But see, I think that's the greatest mistake. Not telling an individual, regardless of the age. So what you do then is, okay, you share even with the child in some way, show them this is what's happening to mom or dad, right? They don't need to be the last one on the tree to know about and find out that she's dying. Now they're mad. Now they're angry. Why was this not shared with me? And then you know what's going to happen? These individuals are going to grow up. Now they're dealing with childhood trauma of never having that moment or that opportunity to have their final words and wishes with their mom or their dad. So what you literally done now is you robbed them of that moment. And now as a result of that, you have short-circuited their existence. You follow me? So what should happen, so if I had a family that came to me, said, Pastor, a mom is dying and she doesn't want anybody to know, and I say, well, that's a big mistake, because death is a part of life. She needs to share that with her children and share it as soon as possible. And if there's a person in there that don't understand death and dying, you need to get them some help and assistance to help them to process their emotions now and not fight them later. It's going to be easier now versus harder later. Yes, sir.
It was a story I was watching on YouTube somewhere in the north where it was a couple got killed on the same day in separate car accident. They have a 7-year-old son. I think the female had the wreck first when they called the groom. I think he had a wreck trying to get to her. So now it's a 7-year-old boy left, but he does have a grandparent, and they're going to try to do the best to explain to him what's going on with his mom and dad.
Yeah. So I think and so here's the thing. We think children can't comprehend, can't understand, but they can explain stuff to you. Then in many ways, and they have a way of putting the pictures together. What I'm saying? So we can't dismiss or discount or devalue an opportunity to talk to them about the realities of life and death. Right? All right? All right, let's go to the next slide. Grief in older adults. Older adults often face compounded grief, losing spouses, friends, or independence. I want to focus on independence more specifically. These losses increase the risk of isolation, depression, making community support and emotional connection essential for healing. The loss of independence. Grief in older adults. Can't drive anymore. I can't go to the bank for myself. I can't go pay my own bills. So here's an interesting scenario, right? Even though in this electronic and digital age, we know how we can pay our bills, but it is nothing you would be, and some of you may be experiencing now and seen it, but to watch an older person and say, I need you to go take me to go pay my bills. So never dismiss that. Never dismiss that. Even though you can just simply push a button, they want to physically be able to go because it's a sense of connecting, because there are communities. We may not view it as community. So I go to the post office. There's a person in that post office that speaks to them. Right? That speaks to them and say, Miss Smith, how are you doing? Good to see you. What, you got some mail today? Yeah, I got 3 pieces of mail. I want to make sure that they get there. I'm going to send my grandchildren X, Y, and Z. It's communication. So they're no longer in the house, right? They're connecting, all right?
Same thing as old people, you just sit on the front porch and wait on the mailman at the first of the month.
Yeah.
Knowing that they were going to see that mailman on that particular day and have a conversation.
Yeah, it was much more than a check.
Yeah.
It was about the communication.
Yeah.
It was about the communication and the relationship, right? Oh my, wow, wow. So here recently, there's a gentleman in Florida, in Miami, that was worked for the Postal Service. I don't know if you guys remember. I had a young lady, older lady that was a part of our prayer ministry, Miss Frances Stevens. She gave a little spiel. She has a brother that died that was in his 80s. He worked for the post office for like 50-something years. And he was a mail carrier, and so mentioned that. And they sent me pictures of his funeral. I was just floored. Didn't get a chance to go, but the number of people he touched and connected with over the years, families, communities, and the people where he dropped them mail was unbelievable. They actually had a parade of people who from Postal Service and family members that would stand outside by the mailboxes and the parade of watching because of this guy, his interaction with people. And the value, and they were having conversations about Mr. So-and-so came by and did this, Mr. Dukes came by and did this, Mr. Dukes came by and did this. He not only brought me mail, but he always talked to me about this, asked me about my children, asked me about my family. All those kind of connectivities, those connections make a big difference. So go back to this idea of the independence, losing of spouses or friends. Those people become friends. Those people become their community. Those people become their connection point. Loss of independence, can no longer drive, no longer take care of their business as they believe they should be able to take care of it, no longer be able to go to the grocery store. We cannot dismiss that. That's a huge loss, that they can't go to the grocery store and pick out their own fruit. Yeah, I don't need you to, or you saw somebody that may be on a walker or whatever, and they kind of dismissive of you helping them. It's not because they're angry or mad at you, because that's that independence. Let me do it for myself. All right, let's go to the next. Anticipatory grief is the mourning that begins before loss. I don't know if that, for those of you who have gone through this process, you can tell me yay or nay. Is that the most challenging time for those loved ones who've had a terminal illness? Anticipating the death or anticipating the separation, anticipating what's going to happen or transpire, and having to carry that moment. And then when the day comes, then you got to deal with the next layer of it. So when you talk about that part, but it becomes an extension or an expansion, right? And you're carrying that moment forever. And it doesn't seem like it's going to ever go up, because you're at that moment in time. And at the same time, this is an area where grief, not grief, but rather guilt emerges. Because in your mind, you're like, man, this person going to die? Will they die? Yes. When will they die? You're anticipating, you're expecting, and because at the same time, physically, you're exhausted. Especially if you are the person that's really helping and assisting, providing care and support, and all the energy that's necessary for that individual. You're wondering when, where, and how. I actually had a person tell me, and she said, I've never said this to anybody, Pastor. She said, but I'm saying it to you. I was wondering when this person was going to die. She says, it's hard for me to say this, and I hate that I'm saying it. She said, but I'm telling you something that was in my head constantly, because they were so overwhelmed, because of the anticipatory grief of carrying it every day. They were seeing them every day, but they were carrying it every day. All right?
In my case, my mother, I lived here. My mother was sick. I came home thinking, save my vacation time so when she gets out of the hospital. But on my way back, she died.
Wow.
So you're trying to balance that with coming home. We have a lot of time because we didn't know
Right.
when she would pass. So it's the not being there also.
That's a huge one, especially when you have family members that live close and you live far away, and so you have that distance and you're trying to do everything you can to get there, and that can be grueling in a lot of different ways. It can be very challenging. It can be overwhelming, and then the other thing that you also deal with as well is guilt. Like, I should have been there. Or you start asking yourself the question, I knew she was aging. I knew she was declining. What could I have done to maybe move closer? Right? All right. So I think I dealt with that moving closer situation with my parents, with my father and then my wife's mother. And we were trying our best to get back closer, but we missed it. And so now you carry that. She was the youngest, I'm the oldest, right? And so you carry that sense of guilt that, I moved so far away, right? And then family members let you hear it too. They say it directly and indirectly, right? I moved so far away, but I'm trying to make my way back professionally to get back closer, but no cigar. It didn't happen. And persons died, and they died 9 months of one another. And so now you're having to carry that guilt for a while. Like, man, I should have been back closer. It's not like you could have stopped there, but it's the idea that I should have been there. I could have had more hands-on. I could have been more involved. But you're anticipating their death, so you're trying to rush to get things in order to get back. And not knowing, but at the end of the day, you realize that you're not God. You don't know the day nor the hour. You don't have death and life in your hand. God knows when it's going to transpire. Do your best. Do everything you can to get in place, get in position to take care of the needs, whatever you can do, where you're located, and do what you can.
Although we have plans to do these type of things, but it's not our plan, it's God's plan. So everything's in his hands once you think about it spiritually.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're exactly right. Everything.
That you didn't make it because it wasn't in the plan.
So obviously, but I think humanly speaking, you still feel that level of guilt because of your role and your capacity.
But spiritual maturity.
Spirit. Part of the spiritual process is and you understand that it is in God's hand at the end of the day, but it does not separate you from that human tug of knowing that, hey, I could have done this or done that. Anyone else on anticipatory grief? Anything else comes up for you as you're dealing with things in your own family? Yes, ma'am.
This has already happened. My family went through a series of deaths, kind of one right behind the other. And I think the last person to die, they were brothers. One during COVID, we got the call, he's dying, and he was in the hospital. But that was that during that time when we couldn't get there because they wanted to let you in the hospital and all this kind of stuff. So, but to get that call saying that he's leaving us and then not be able to get in there, it was difficult for us. And then I was the same brother. I was at a doctor's office, and I got a call saying that he was dying again, and that they was sending him to hospice. So they sent him to hospice, and this is a miracle. They sent him to hospice. That he was do not resuscitate patient. He was developmentally disabled, so we had to make all of those decisions about whether to resuscitate or not and all of this kind of stuff. So we had signed the papers, do not resuscitate, because he had a difficult life, because he was developmentally disabled. So when we got the call, but he was a sweetheart, when we got the call saying that they were going to transfer him into hospice, Now, that was a long anticipation of his dying. You know, you don't ever know when that day is gonna happen. How about his birthday? This was in August. His birthday was August 28th. That they transferred him to hospice. And the day of his birthday was the 28th of August. And they made him a little cupcake. And he sat up and ate that cupcake for his birthday, and his whole life just turned around right there in hospice. And he ended up coming out there. That was just, it was just mind-blowing to us.
So when did he actually pass?
He passed about September or October of that year. I forgot the exact date, but he came out of hospice and he went into a nursing home, and that's where he passed.
So you raise an interesting point, because anticipatory grief in the hospice setting, that's a place as well where you're grappling with grief when this person is going to die, and that person is in hospice care, and you're trying to figure out how do you handle it. But I think one of the things that you do is value the time, make the most of the time. Ask those multiple questions about, even when it comes to forgiveness. Is there anything that we have that's challenging our relationship? There's a well-known doctor that talks about the 4 things that you should ask during that time period of hospice. One would be forgiveness in a strained relationship. Second one would be, I think, relates to expressing your moments of love. Thirdly is to be able to communicate. Even when that person is dying, there's a sense of that they can still have a way of hearing. Some things are just very unexplainable, but that the fact that they can still hear. So we treat hospice as a place, oh, I don't want to go to that place. But if it's inevitable and death is approaching, I would encourage you to welcome that and embrace that, because it could be a qualitative place for you to engage with that person, to celebrate life with that person, and spend some quality time with that person without all this other stuff being attached to them, plugged up to them in a hospital setting, and them trying to maintain life. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Into that, 2 things that I've learned in hospice situation, because I went through it with my cousin and I went through it with my mother. Just what you said, ask for forgiveness of things that you know, and apologize and love on them as much as you can. I found that the grief person told me to tell my mother that we were going to be all right, that sisters and brothers was going to take care of each other. And she could go home and go to rest. And it's a real powerful tool. The same thing with my cousin. We told her that we were going to take care of each cousin, and everything was going to be all right. We weren't going to put her husband out. It really is powerful. And it was like, with my mother, it was like within 3 days, and I told her I would make sure, I'm going to do my best to make sure everybody come before you leave this earth, so we can all be together again. And when my brother made it, and I left the room for him to say whatever he needed to say, my mother passed after that. But it was like she was waiting on, and I think a lot of times they're in hospice, they're holding on for you. They're holding on for you.
Yeah.
But to give them the power, or release them from holding on for you and just rest for themselves.
There was a guy that wrote this article called "The Unfinished of the Death and the Dying," unfinished business of the death and dying. And that's what he referred to. They oftentimes feel like they feel unsettled because they feel like there's unfinished business. So here they are. They can't do anything. They know they can't do it. They're dying, but they still, I got a wife that I'm worried about. I got children that I'm worried about. I still got stuff still got in my mind that I'm going through that I need to finish, I need to complete, I need to resolve, I need to make sure everything's okay. But when you have a person honestly on the other side that can say to them, hey, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure A, B, C, and D is done. It brings a sense of relief to that person. Not only does it bring relief, but they also can release. And it's almost like it's like the chains fall off. And you may be tearful saying it, but if you can bring yourself to say that and actually be honest, because they can depict if you're lying. You know, if you're not honest and you're not doing what you say you're going to do, and you need to be that person in that room to be able to share that with them so that they can, you know, make that separation. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Anticipatory, with my mom and my dad. That my dad had blood disease, and I was constantly thinking, he's going to die, he's going to die. And there was something I wanted to talk to him about, and I didn't. And I made a decision that I was going to talk to him on my next visit. But he passed the day before I got there. And my home was not that far away, 250 miles. But I lived here, going home on the weekends. Now, that bothered me for a long, long time. And when I say a long time, I mean a long time, that I did not discuss with him what I wanted to discuss with him when I was sitting in front of him and could have. Took me years to get over that. Same thing with my mother. It was not like, I guess it was like anticipating that she would. She had, well, I guess it was like an aneurysm. And they said she was bleeding on the brain. But right before that, I had heard my mom say something that disturbed her. And my name came up. And I thought, I'm going to have to talk to her. I'm going to really have to talk to her. I was going home. We were taking turns to see about her, several of us. Everybody had a weekend. I waited for my weekend. I never got it. That bothered me for years. And I'm just beginning to feel more comfortable with myself. But it's still there. My sister passed in February. My oldest sister. She was like a mom to me. We took care of her for years. Oldest son said, you all act like I'm not here. I want to take care of my mom. My sister has a will. She has a will. It has not been probated yet. We're just kind of sitting because it just happened. We said, okay, we'll give you a try. Me and my youngest brother, we're the ones that's in charge. My brother said, I'm going to let you take care of her because it's your mom. And you're sounding like you really want to take care of her. Well, he and his wife did not take care of her the way we thought she should have been taken care of. Because when we had, she still had her care. She was happy, but she got unhappy. And she made a statement to me. She said, Gloria, you all are doing this. You might as well bury me. And when she died, she was still in his care. But that bothers me. But what she said, I'm going to have to go to her.
You know, and I think the things left unsaid, and that we did not get an opportunity to say, or the opportunities where we should have maybe interjected ourselves in part of the process, either providing care or support for individuals, can weigh on us heavily. And then we're trying to balance between family. Should I get involved? Should I not get involved? But at the end of the day, you ask yourself the question, what did I do wrong in this process? And then you have to carry the guilt. But I think the breakthrough comes is when you can voice that, articulate that, and even say that, because I've heard it. You and I have talked about parts of that. But the fact that you were able to share that even in this setting, that's unbeknownst to a lot of folks here in this room, it helps you to unearth and unpackage the stuff that may have held you bound for years and decades, and not feeling like you had anybody to talk to about this. But the fact that you moved from just carrying the guilt, now sharing the guilt, and saying, sharing about the guilt I feel. And then for us saying to you that that is not a place that you should have to be, or to find yourself in that place and posture when you know you've done your best. And I repeat this over and again, over and over again, and that is this. When you know you've done your best and you're honest before God, you're truthful about a situation, you reevaluate yourself. You look yourself in the mirror. You look at it even through the pages of Scripture as it relates to integrity and ethics and how you treat people and how you handle people. And it comes back and say, hey, you did the best that you could. You did what you need to do. Then you settle down and say, okay, God, take this guilt from me. Take this guilt. I can't handle it. I can't deal with it. Take it. It's in your hands. I've carried this for years and decades. And if there's something along the way where I was at fault, please forgive me and release me from this, because it's held me bound emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. But I think the biggest breakthrough for you, Miss Gloria, is this, is that you were able to share it in a setting that your story was unknown to many folks in this room. And I think that's huge and significant. And so kudos to you. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Control her whole life. And she was very strong-willed. She used that power. I'm an only child on Facebook. Most people don't know, but I'm an only child. And when she got sick Christmas Day, we went to the hospital, and they told her within a week that she would go in the hospice, that she was passing. You know, she was making those transitional steps. It still didn't cross my mind. I got her into a nursing home, and they said basically the same thing, but it still didn't click. I was busy taking care of the business of taking care of her. That's what my focus was. And she was so strong-willed, she stopped eating, stopped drinking, everything. It still didn't click that she was not making that transition. But she said to me one day, okay, you're in control now. And I went, oh, because all my life she wielded that pain, very strong. And at that point, she started going downhill. But I was still about the business of taking care of her, making sure she had care providers in the whole 9 yards, because I had someone come in during the day, and I would take the evenings and the weekends because it was just me. But when she passed, I realized that was her letting go. When she said, you're in control now. Because it was important for her to always be in control, even when she had to be in control. And when she said that, that was it. I mean, I didn't have to do the reverse telling her she could go. She was at that point telling me, I'm beautiful. And I was controlling that. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Very. I think that's important as you kind of look at the dynamics and you go back, reevaluate and assess some of the things. It can bring up old wounds, but at the same time, it can also help you heal from places that you may have not healed before. So let's go to the next one, Keyshawn.
If you enjoy this program, call us right now, 404-688-6680, or send an email to info@mtpleasantatl.org. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church is a congregation full of life and love for everybody. Would you consider sowing an offering? Whatever God lays on your heart to give would be a blessing to the ministry. Thank you for your support. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, Atlanta, Georgia.